Be a visionary with debonair, a playa from the Himalayas, iconic, not ironic, and become a night owl tonight, where like-minded members get together at the Night Owl Lounge, enjoying extra content, backstage hangouts, exclusive interviews by going to realdealmedia.tv/membership. Again, that's realdealmedia.tv/membership. Join tonight.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. This is Dean Ryan, your late night host, as tonight is, in many regards, a season opener of sorts, but a very late night season opener or late night update. Tonight is just an incredible, in depth, I should say. Those are the right words that sometimes escape me because of the amount of news that has been literally soaring through the headlines across the country. As late night update, we are going to be getting into some of the weekly headlines that made your newspaper, your front door newspaper. But in particular, we're going to go further into the USAID discovery here tonight. And then we're going to parlay that into South Africa, a country often maybe misunderstood, overlooked, or not even thought about. After all, it's a huge continent in Africa, but what about South Africa? As Trump has really singled out the country of South Africa in its relation to a recipient of the foreign aid from us, the United States, in particular the USAID, and how it all ties in together. But more importantly, too, and specifically, is why did Donald Trump annex any further just charitable deeds and goods and financial services to South Africa? We're going to explore that as the poverty level for white people in Africa is skyrocketing, but so is the land forfeitures from farmers and the supposed genocide against the white South Africans is something that I don't think many Americans, let alone Westerners, truly grasp the diversity of South Africa, but the murderous high crime rate that is really creating a chaotic scene over there. So we're going to have a really in-depth look at that. Plus, we're going to bring Ranger Buck on in a little bit here as he gives us his take and shares with us about what China's doing behind the scenes as the land grabbing from China is now coming to a halt as the Panama Canal is really, really upping the game of the United States and the negotiators. So we're going to be taking a very big look into that here tonight. But let's get started right now as late night update. It is something to be seen as an extreme version of it here tonight. Let's get to some headlines now, because you can't even turn your head for 1 minute. A news story is boom right there. In fact, I forgot it was Super Bowl Sunday tomorrow, because I've been so immersed in everything that's happening right now. Continuing here, as now Doge has really made its mark. Elon Musk has been on fire, so much so that he's almost being targeted just as much as Donald Trump. And some huge revelations over the course of the past week and further 2 weeks for that fact. USAID, nobody even knew really what that was unless you're really in the know. But yeah, it made a huge stench. And who can forget the Ukrainian shills and their USAID and all the Hollywood industrial whorebags that were just receiving millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money. And it's so guilty, such a smoking gun. Even Ben Stiller, who made the list, he said he denied it. He said, oh, he paid for it with his own money. I mean, that's how bad it's getting. Really, that's how bad it's getting, but that's exposure for you. But now there's a news story brewing here as this is coming out of Natural News. USAID's wasteful spending, how taxpayer dollars funded the COVID labs, the LGBTQ initiatives, and a whole lot more. And ladies and gentlemen, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And for that fact, we still don't even know the whole just golden corral of the Twitter files, do we? I don't think so. Anyways, as we were saying, USAID's wasteful spending now is really coming under fire, as USAID has been criticized for wasting billions on programs that undermine U.S. interest, including funding the Coronapalooza labs, research labs over there in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Yeah, I never saw that coming. That goes to the old claim that the CIA really was one of the major authors of this pandemic. Well, the agency allocated millions to LGBTQ and DEI initiatives abroad, sparking backlash for misaligned priorities. And don't we know it? I mean, who remembers the day that Starbucks said, well, we welcome all the hobos from the inner cities. Just come on in, put your feet up. You don't have to buy anything, and go ahead and have your way with our restrooms. And it turned the baristas into social workers. And that is one of the consequences and attributes of DEI. Well, in addition to that, now it's coming out that USAID funded $102 million in Afghanistan programs under the Taliban rule, risking aid diversion to terrorist groups. Well, President Trump froze foreign aid grants for now 90 days to many people who were just hooting and hollering with just dirty slurs about it. Yeah, so 90 days to curb wasteful spending on non-essential programs. Also, critics, including Elon Musk, call for USAID's dissolution now, citing its lack of accountability, alignment with U.S. interests. Now, in a stunning example of the fiscal irresponsibility, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, has squandered billions of taxpayer dollars on programs that not only fail to benefit many Americans, that's right, but actively undermine the interest. And we know about the COVID labs, the LGBTQ initiatives, funding for the Taliban, and a whole lot more waste. And it just grows and grows like a bar tab, doesn't it? Continuing now with USAID. Well, look at this now. And we'll come back to South Africa now in a little bit here. But in this case, South Africa's minister now calls for mineral boycotts in response to the U.S. aid cuts. That's right. South Africa got their aid cut, and they're not too happy about it. Well, let me tell you about it. Well, now, yes, the minister over there in South Africa, some say he's very corrupt. Well, the South African Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, his name is Gwede Mantashe, calls for the African nations to withhold mineral exports to the United States in response to President Trump's decision to cut aid over land expropriation policies now. Well, the conflict stems now from South Africa's the expropriation bill. Yeah, you might have heard about that, which allows the government to seize land without compensation under certain conditions, aiming to address racial and economic disparities. Now, why this is so important, before you start overlooking South Africa, understand that a lot of this Communist Manifesto playbook, it has been tried and tested in South Africa. So South Africa really is the model for the blue states here and for the Commonwealth, which the CCP light leftover Democrats are still practicing doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down in many, many cases. And it all stems from South Africa. Isn't that interesting? It's no coincidence, too, that Nelson Mandela was a hardcore communist, but you didn't hear it from me. Well, now South Africa holds now a significant reserve of crucial minerals for U.S. industries, including technology, defense, making the potential boycott a significant challenge for the United States interests. In fact, President Ramaphosa emphasizes South Africa's commitment to the rule of law and seeks to clarify land reform policy with Trump, while the U.S. remains skeptical of the policies of implementation now. And in closing, standoff highlights the complex dynamics of the U.S.-Africa relations with implications for the global mineral market, international trade, geopolitics. So there you have it. Let me tell you, some of these policies that are coming out now with South Africa, where's that stem from? China. China's all up and down Africa like no one's business. Continuing. Well, now we have, in a positive news of USAID, as I saw this coming from literally 10 miles away. Now, Argentina's president has now shaken up the global health and has also withdrawn from the globalist World Health Organization after Trump did. And this is all coming in the light of a lot of this USAID and who it's affecting. But this is an important story because Argentina is almost like many of the other South American countries has been captured by China until recently. Well, yes, they just shake things up. Well, Argentinian President Javier Milei has ordered the country's withdrawal from the World Health Organization in the post-revelations of USAID, while citing profound differences in health management and the organization's lack of independence during the Wuhan Coronapalooza era, who remembers that, and the pandemic that led to extensive economically damaging lockdowns. While the decision aligns with previous actions from U.S. President Donald Trump, not that I have to tell you, who also withdrew the U.S. from the WHO roughly a week ago, as he stated and claimed that it was due to the unduly influenced by China. Well, Buenos Aires criticized the WHO for being swayed by the political agendas of powerful member states, emphasizing the need of reevaluation of the role and the effectiveness of the supernatural organizations out there and their impact on the national sovereignty of all of us. Well, President Milei's government argues withdrawing from the WHO, as in who cares, will provide greater flexibility in implementing health policies tailored to the Argentines' needs. And just like a Democrat in a former, or I should say foreign country, it makes no sense, and logic is not even in the equation. Finally, Argentina's decision is part of a broader trend in the region. You're going to see Paraguay, Uruguay, all of the other neighboring countries follow the lead of Argentina. And how many years have I told everybody in this effective audience that America is leading the way? Once they show true resistance and defiance, it will be a domino effect around the world. In the same regard, just financially, if America sneezes, the rest of the world has a financial cold, to use that old metaphor. So they're adopting all the policies of the new Trump 2.0 era. Continuing now. Well, this is now an insider has now spoken about the true damage and the true effectiveness of U.S. aid, but really about Doge. Let me tell you about this. This is quite revealing on many levels. Well, insider level of the Democratic panic now over Musk freezing U.S. aid is, quote, unlike anything ever seen. An insider who's in the depths of it all. A Democratic Party insider says the level of panic over Trump and Elon's Doge freezing of all of USAID spending is unlike anything anybody in the DC Beltway has ever seen before. Sources describe the development as a, quote, killing blow to the heart of the deep state. Talked to a friend who has connections within the Democratic Party. He said the level of the panic over Trump and Elon shutting down USAID is unlike anything he's ever seen or will ever possibly see again. Now, this is a really a very telling kind of a statement here. In fact, this insider said, quote, this is worse than 9/11 for Democrats. USAID is the primary vessel they use to achieve political agendas. USAID is and always has been the primary source of funding their influence, peddling schemes for the indirect sources of income. Isn't that the case? In closing, USAID is the golden goose of the communist Democrats. Yes, it is. And that's just a little thing here. But I want to show you something here because there seems to be somebody who has now came out of the lurking shadows. It's a CIA-backed PSYOP group, many have said, who has come out of the retirement, just pensioner halls, furious over the termination of U.S. aid, which is weird, and is now issuing dire warnings against Trump's presidency. You're going to see this clip here. They also claim Trump's America First policies will trigger hyperinflation and accuse him of waging economic warfare on U.S. citizens. Even more revealing, this group are so outraged over federal employee firings and are now demanding that all illegal immigrants be allowed to stay. Isn't that something? Well, let me reintroduce, I guess. Here is the CIA's Anonymous.
Consequences will be severe. Every imported product you rely on, everyday essentials, food, technology, will see skyrocketing prices, making even basic necessities unattainable for the average American. What you perceive as a simple rise in costs is, in reality, a calculated strategy. The plan? To systematically dismantle the lower class, to push those already struggling into the abyss of poverty where they will face an impossible choice. Perish or submit to servitude under the wealthy elite. Make no mistake, this is economic warfare, and the target is you. The recent ICE raids are not just about immigration enforcement, they are about control. The Trump administration seeks to reignite the flames of racial inequality and segregation-era policies, erasing diversity to craft a nation built on division and fear. These operations are disrupting local economies, forcing businesses to crumble, and ensuring the economic elimination of the working class. What follows is a society engineered to serve the interests of the few at the cost of the many. And as the oligarchy takes shape, another darker ideology is creeping into the mainstream. Fascist ideals, once whispered in the shadows, are now being openly embraced. Symbolism matters. Gestures matter. Elon Musk, a figure of immense influence, recently tested the waters with a gesture recognized worldwide as a Nazi salute. This was not an accident. It was a message, a challenge, a warning. But know this, the people are not silent. Despite the administration's best efforts to muzzle dissent, the voices of resistance grow louder. Trump's reckless overhauls, his purges of experienced government officials, his chaotic restructuring of critical infrastructure, have created vulnerabilities, weaknesses, entry points. This transition period is his greatest liability, but it is also our greatest opportunity. The rushed implementation of new systems, the mass firings of key personnel, and the chaotic dismantling of existing structures have left behind critical gaps that Anonymous can and will exploit. Every system that has been hastily restructured without foresight, every official removed without proper transition planning, leaves behind exposed veins within the government's framework. These vulnerabilities are more than just bureaucratic inefficiencies. They are cracks in the foundation that can and will be breached. Anonymous watches. Anonymous waits. The time to act is fast approaching. The administration's arrogance blinds them to the fragility of their own system. Their overconfidence in their ability to silence dissent and erase opposition will be their undoing.
Okay, yeah, that's good enough. Thank you, Mr. Anonymous, aka Rob Reiner, or whoever is behind that mask, to talk about the USAID and the return welcome back tour of Anonymous. Is somebody who has been following this whole USAID crisis for quite some time. Ranger Buck, former military special forces, thank you for being here at Late Night Update. Buck, I want to go over this with you as we have a little short segment here, but before we get into USAID, do you recall a lot of charitable non-governmental outfits back in your time in the military? Was that a heavy presence back then, or is this kind of in the in the wake of the Obama clandestine, these started to come around? Because USAID hasn't been around for ages, has it?
Yeah, it was started under Kennedy in 61 or 62, around that time
Okay.
frame. And it was
Why are we just hearing about it now? Because it first came to light when John McCain and Miss Lindsey Graham were going around with USA wherever Al Qaeda went. So when was this capture and takeover? When did this happen, or was it always this way?
well, I think Trump's first term, everybody learns really quick that the president has no power to control spending and no power to control the finances. In fact, even Congress has no control. It's really in the hands of these deep state Treasury Department officials who have other. Our money goes to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve is not federal, and there's no reserve, and that goes to the world bankers in Europe, and it basically holds the world together with our dollars that we print, and that's why it's flowing out of the United States, and it's really fraudulent, and that's what the military operation that's been ongoing since Trump declared war in 2017, 2018.
Okay. Well,
That's
this
what
makes
it's all
sense
about.
now. So now I want to ask you this, and I got about a question or two left. But so when you were in combat, when you were in the what was it, Gulf War, was USAID present amongst your battalions and military in general back then? Were
They
they a
weren't.
heavy
They
presence?
weren't in the. I was in the first wave. I got in Iraq and Kuwait in March of 2003, and then, but they were coordinating like a lot of the workers that were there were from USAID, and they came from Pakistan mostly, and the barber shops, the concession stands that we had, all the MWR, the morale, welfare, recreation. There was a lot of NGOs involved in that, but KBR and Halliburton were the ones that were funneling the money to themselves back then. In fact, I got a story. When you go into the DFAC, they would have a soldier there standing with a clicker. Well, actually, it wasn't a soldier, it would be a KBR individual that would stand there, and they would press the clicker when you walk by to count the amount of dinners that you had. And they were $25 a piece. And every time, if you walk by yourself, you would hear click, 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 and there would be like 10 dinners charged to your account. So that's $250.
Interesting. And you
Then
said KBR. You said KBR because that was the
Halliburton,
out. Okay, they were. Correct me if I'm wrong. They were involved with the Boston bombing. The KBR guys on the
Kellogg
ground.
Brown and Root,
Okay.
Kellogg Brown and Root, and Halliburton were the two defense contractors that
Um.
Dick Cheney preferred, and they made billions and billions of dollars off of the Iraq War.
Okay. Real quick, Buck. We do have some somewhat breaking news. It's very up to date. This just happened hours ago. We can report here at Late Night Update that a federal judge has now blocked Elon Musk and all of Doge from accessing sensitive Treasury material. This just happened today. A federal judge blocked all of this. Records that contain sensitive personal data such as Social Security and bank account numbers for millions of Americans. U.S. District Judge Paul A. Engelmayer issued the preliminary injunction after 19 Democratic attorney generals sued Donald Trump. The Democrats don't want this to go away. They want their lunch money. Now, the case filed in federal court over there in New York City, what could go wrong with that, alleges that Trump administration allowed Musk team access to the Treasury Department central payment system in violation of federal law. Kind of in closing here, Buck, and we're going to bring you back for our next segment with everything China, but how scared are the Democrats of Elon Musk? Because they know what he did with Twitter. They know what he did with X. They know, is this bigger than the Twitter files? Are they way more scared of Elon than Trump at this point?
Well, this is huge because, I mean, if you just go into the largest corporation that received the most money from USAID, it's what is it? Kimoko or Kim, anyway, it's a company that Hillary Clinton actually was involved in, and they were running adrenochrome, and it all has to do with all the children from Africa.
Wow. That's
And
right.
and the adrenochrome running. So that's what they really don't want to be dug out and brought up, and then it got billions of dollars to this company.
It's also worth noting this is an Obama-appointed activist, and also one of the other discoveries in the tracing of all this taxpayer money that went to USAID. A significant amount of finances went to Turning Point USA, who was being financed by USAID. That's no surprise to me, Buck. You know, I've never felt great about Charlie Kirkland, and he's always protecting Israel and they get a lot of Zionist money too. Why wouldn't they get any CIA money? So you got to be, independent.
Well, all the Snoops, all the Politico, all the Reuters was paid off by USAID. All these,
really?
New York Times got $50 million.
New York Times. That's right.
I mean, all these anti-Trump media companies. That's how they were propped up and supported over the entire first term of the president. Now, and you can go back. The evidence, and they've got it, but that order, that was an ex parte order, which is very rarely done. They didn't even give the opportunity for Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. He doesn't even have access. They even banned the Treasury Secretary from having access. And I mean, they're scared to death. But another thing, too, that this all comes into play is they were planning an economic collapse. The deep state's planning an economic collapse under Trump's term. So this all goes into that, and it delayed it because they were going to try to do it.
Interesting.
So they delayed it.
Interesting.
All right. So now, it's going to be
a tactic.
Now it's all they turned it back over to the deep staters that are in the Treasury Department, so that when this economic collapse happens, it'll be their fault. And because they were going to blame it on Trump and all his, and what he was doing.
There was also a different route to the White House for Trump. He was going to announce and reclaim the presidency once the financial collapse happened. It was supposed to have happened 2 years ago, and so on. And we could go on for days. Stand by there, Buck. We'll see you in the next. See you in the next segment. Okay, we're going to get to everything South Africa and Congo right now, but just to kind of showcase what happens over there in South Africa. It is a inverted kind of reality here. Some of the most impoverished demographics in the country of South Africa are not who you would imagine. They're the white citizens of the country. And here's a little glimpse of just what exactly that is like in a very corrupt kind of environment, which you'll soon learn as we finish tonight's episode here. Check this out and we'll discuss after.
This is Coronation Park, a squatter camp in Krugersdorp, South Africa. Although impoverished blacks in the region far outnumber their white counterparts, this camp is one of a growing number of townships populated mostly by Afrikaners, white South Africans. In the 19 years since the fall of apartheid, more and more whites are coming face to face with poverty and social meltdown.
I'm sorry, it's racist. I'm not a racist, but the blacks comes first and then the whites. And even highly qualified whites don't even get a position in South Africa.
A controversial affirmative action policy sees blacks take precedence over whites on the job market, giving some people little choice but to move into tents and caravans in camps such as this one.
Apartheid was a problem, but this is the only country in the world where the majority has got affirmative action. America's got affirmative action, everybody's got affirmative action, but this is the only country where the majority has got affirmative action.
Post-apartheid governments have struggled to achieve redistribution of wealth and economic growth, and formerly comfortable Afrikaners see themselves as victims of reverse apartheid. In spite of this, white South Africans still control most of the country's economy.
Who would have saw that coming? And this is what they've been living through in the modern era to this day. Let's get to some real deal international news as the late night update continues to soar way past midnight now. But let's start with Congo. Without getting into all the details, Congo was going to reform a true bond and trade relationship with at least their intent to, with the United States. And as that was about to happen, well, China moved in and all hell broke loose. Literally, they were going to do Disease X, which was going to be patient zero from Congo just roughly 2 months ago. Well, that brings us now to this is, we'll get back to China. Trump says, excuse me here. We'll get back to what Trump says here in a minute. But here's the story we want to lead off with. Congo summit directs army chiefs to enforce ceasefire. There's now warlords and civil wars now breaking out in Congo. Now, if you don't know what Congo is, Congo, nearby South Africa, that is where all the diamonds come from. And we were about this close to having a true new relationship, but all hell has broke loose because we were winning. I don't even know how else to explain it now. Well, now, yes, madmen are just being paid by the Chinese government, warlords, that is, to recruit the youngins and wreak havoc to destabilize the country, only to bring in the peacekeepers of the PLA. Well, someone over there in the African leaders to address the crises over there, the Democratic Republic of Congo has directed army chiefs to meet in 5 days and provide technical direction on immediate and unconditional ceasefire. The meeting, which came close to Tanzania on Saturday, brought together leaders of 8 nation East African communities. Now, why this is important? Because they have Rwanda-backed armed groups shooting up the whole joints. And they're going to carry that into South Africa. You watch. If there's any movement, any ground made by the American influence into the country of South Africa, or if they get rid of the corrupt leader, you're going to see these Rwandans come out of nowhere. Yes. So just to give you a little taste of it now, to go back. Now, Trump says some South Africans are oppressed and could be resettled in the United States. They say no thanks. See, all eyes are on there. It's incredible how the ICC, the International Criminal Court, really resides there, isn't it? But let me tell you about this now, as it is very pressing as we learn about some of the aid that went to this country. Well, Donald Trump has now just spoken, as now groups representing some of the South African white minority, as you saw there, responded Saturday to a plan by President Donald Trump to offer them refugee status and resettlement in the United States by saying thanks, but no thanks. Boy, I can't believe that. Well, the plan was detailed recently in an executive order Trump signed just this last Friday that stopped all aid and financial assistance to South Africa as punishment for what Trump administration said were, quote, rights violations by the government against some of its white citizens. Trump's administration accused South African government of allowing violent attacks on white Afrikaner farmers, introducing a land expiration law that enables it to, quote, seize the ethnic minority Afrikaners' agricultural property without compensation. Isn't this exactly what the communist state-sponsored Black Lives Matter was kind of professing as their intent, their hopes? Their objectives was to, you don't own that house, give it to us and give us some reparations too. Do we see where this all stemmed from? Well, the South African government has denied any of the concerted attacks on white farmers and said that's a myth. It's a dream. It's a rumor. It's Trump's description and deception of the new land law, full of misinformation and distortions. Now, Afrikaners have now descended from mainly, if you didn't know, Dutch, but also French, German colonial settlers who first arrived in South Africa more than 300 years ago. And in fact, Elon Musk is from South Africa. Dave Matthews from South Africa, Annie Lennox. And a lot of people would think that they sound British with the untrained American ear at times. But a lot of the white settlers are starting to fight back and saying, we're not going anywhere. Well, I put something together before we even get to China. I want us to fully understand the plight of the citizens, of the individuals of South Africa, in particular, the Caucasian citizens, and what they're going through, because their voice really doesn't travel far throughout this ever-changing headline-oriented news of the world. Well, what better way to really give them a chance of expressing, well, their own plight, their journeys. Here it is. We're 2 parts. We'll stop midway and give some expressions of our own.
South Africa could start taking away white-owned land without compensation and giving that land back to black farmers. For some, this is history being righted, a just retribution for the years of exploitation and dispossession by white settlers. For others, it's a path to economic ruin and an issue that has inflamed right-wing commentators abroad who talk of white genocide. So what is South Africa doing about its land? More than 20 years since the end of apartheid, inequality is still rife in South Africa. A recent World Bank report said that the country is one of the most unequal in the world. While workers at the bottom have wages similar to the average in Bangladesh, those in the top 10% enjoy wages closer to Austria. And race is a strong indicator of poverty. The country's poorest are almost exclusively black and coloured South Africans. Some politicians believe that this inequality is largely caused by a lack of black land ownership, since many black South Africans are consigned to townships. And townships are underdeveloped urban areas that were reserved for Africans, coloureds and Indians during apartheid. So what does land ownership have to do with modern South Africa? Before the end of apartheid in 1994, the country faced centuries of colonisation. It began in the 17th century with the arrival of the Dutch, and over the years, European settlers dispossessed the indigenous population of their land. In 1913, the theft was formalised and the Natives Land Act was signed, which saw the majority of South African land reserved for whites or Europeans. Then in the 1960s, a series of laws were passed called the Group Areas Act, and these laws prevented free movement and forced black people to live in townships and work only in certain areas. Today, in South Africa, white people still own 73% of private farmland in the country, despite only making up 8% of South Africa's population. This is what South Africa's president thinks about land ownership in his country.
The dispossession of land of the indigenous people of this country is therefore what I characterize as the original sin that continues to constrain the realization of the potential of our people.
South Africa's parliament has agreed to re-examine a constitutional clause on land reform, and that includes the possibility of allowing expropriation without compensation. The African National Congress said it would transfer 30% of white-owned land to black farmers by 2000, but that target was never met. Ruth Hall, a professor who focuses on the land question, says that the ANC government has failed to use its mandate to address land dispossession over the last 24 years.
The land reform process has proceeded very slowly. What that means in practice is that the interests of property owners have routinely trumped the interests of black South Africans.
So what do both sides say? The issue of land reform has been campaigned for by the economic freedom fighters. They're a far-left party and the third largest in the South African parliament. Their leader is Julius Malema, a controversial figure who has been convicted of hate speech in the past. They argue that a revolutionary form of land reform will allow greater economic equality, as well as give black Africans their dignity.
The land, access to the land is an important basis to participate in a common project of nationhood. And to that extent, it's not just about poverty and inequality and economy. It is also a question of belonging. It's a question fundamentally for us.
Okay, well, you heard what Rerun was saying there for us. And the key words, I don't know if you got that. I was jotting things down virtually in my head, is land reform. But then the big one, equality. Equality. Where have we seen this creeping into Western society? Is that the bankers, the oligarchies, the elites, they create a minority group. Then they empower the minority group who has been tarnished for decades. Now they're bulletproof, and they use that as the bully pulpit to then what started off as equality rights like LGBTQ. Then they become the most powerful, biggest lobbyists that do the bidding and the work of the communist manifestos over there in South Africa. South Africa is just flooded with communism everywhere. Did you see that? All the red berets, little red berets everywhere. Oh, my gosh. Let's finish it off here with part two of the land reform for all of the equalities and the just equity. So get your red berets. Here we go for part two, and we're going to finish it off here.
But the idea of taking the land without compensation has been heavily criticised. Some, such as the Democratic Alliance, the main opposition party, says that this is the ANC government's attempt to court EFF voters. I spoke with Ken Robertson. He's the Democratic Alliance's shadow minister for land reform. The Democratic Alliance says land expropriation without compensation will damage the South African economy. And Robertson said that the constitution does not even need to change to implement land reform. He said that the government has just been slow to act.
So we're totally behind land reform, as long as it's within the parameters of the Constitution. And again, there's no reason to be able to be venturing out of the Constitution where it has been proven in the Western Cape that land reform can actually work.
Now, many opponents...
Okay, that's all we need to hear. They're main focused. Every government official seems to be mainly focused on quote-unquote land reform. Wow. You really don't know how thick the globalism is and the ideological subversion given to us by China really is just in every fabric of society that's just worth a damn here. Worth a damn. That's just something else. Anyways, we have we got to get to this story here because I mentioned China, and China is always been on the offense. In our weakest moments, they've always been land grabbing, stealing technology, stealing codes, for I almost said centuries, feels that way, but for decades. Well, now China seems to be on the defense, and we're not used to seeing them that way. And Buck has a thing or two to say about it, but let me tell you about this first. As now China is lashing out. I guess they're lashing out at an American version of land reform, of land equality and equity. Just incredible. Yeah. So they're now just having a hissy fit, a big one at that, over the Panama Canal, which is, we should really do a deeper dive and maybe a special report on the building of the Panama Canal and that whole time and era that it was, being developed. But now China's lashing out at the United States over, quote, coercion after Panama declines to renew infrastructure agreements. That's right. China just recently on Friday lashed out at what it called the coercion over there with the U.S. and Panama declined to renew a key infrastructure agreement with the Beijing following Washington's threat to take back the Panama Canal now. Is the foreign ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said at a briefing that China, quote, firmly opposes the U.S. smearing and undermining the Belt and Road cooperation through the means of pressure and coercion. See, why this is huge is the Red Railway initiative before the little Belt and Road building of all these train tracks from China. China and Israel had an agreement. That's now off the table. Then they put all their Chinese eggs in the basket of the Belt and Road project. But now that's falling apart, and it's bad news for the CCP, which is really great news for me personally. Well, now, continuing now, as the Assistant Foreign Minister, Zhao Zhahin also met Panama's ambassador to China and lodged a Solomon representation on Friday. Foreign Ministry said Saturday that the Belt and Road Initiative is President Xi Jinping's signature foreign police drive to bind China closer to the countries in the region and beyond by building roads, railways, airports, power plants, and porta potties too, if you really think about it. While the program has completed some major projects, but also raised concerns about the debt and environmental impact, Panama's decision to walk away from this, which was made a lot of big splash over this last week's news headlines. Well, the concession to the U.S., as they've now been given, or we've been given by Panama, is now over the canal after U.S. Secretary of State little Marco Rubio warned Panamanian leader Jose Raul that Sunday that Panama must immediately reduce what Trump says Chinese influence over the canal has to date. Okay, let's get into it a bit more here and expand on this. Buck, let's talk about China now. We're used to seeing China on the progression, playing offense, receiving acolytes, the new Chinese century. This is the first time, Buck, to date that I can think of that China is. They kind of drew the shortest stick here. Is this a sign of things to come, do you think?
Actually, they're making moves that are chess moves all across the world. They're working on they got Morocco, Prince of Morocco in their pocket now, and he's got the Strait of Gibraltar that you see over my shoulder there. They're also working with Egypt to cut off the Suez Canal, control it. You should know that they've been the last 20 years working to control all the ports, and they actually made a deal with Israel to control their ports, including Gaza, back before COVID. And
what a bad deal.
Yeah, and well, South Africa is the same thing. That the reason they need South Africa is because it's a seaway, and with the 5G and the Gwen towers and the ability to use microwave energy lasers and stuff like that, they can close these seaports and canals off and keep us. In fact, with Prince of Morocco, they specifically planned and agreed with him to block us from accessing the Mediterranean if they have to fight over Gaza, because this is why Trump made the outrageous claim that we were going to take Gaza, and that it's all a stab at China to make China make a move.
Okay, let me just break in here. This is so key what you're saying. A lot of what people's emotional responses to what we're seeing in the public forum, it's completely different behind the scenes. Let me tell you why Trump signed an executive order for AI. I'm now finding out with stuff that's happening, outside of the show, which maybe we'll hear about one day. But they are taking complete and utter control of everything AI in the United States, from traitorous government officials in the military and in the Treasury and throughout the federal government, espionage. They have made the efforts to go forward and control all of the AI features in this country going forward. Had Trump not took away Huawei, the 5G Huawei's throughout the United States, they were, like you said, with a weapon like the Havana syndrome. They have weapons that are 50 years in the future. This is how they control people in the coastal cities of the United States. Why does everyone in LA think all the same? Seattle, New York, nobody can see anything. You know what I mean?
It's hive mind control through frequencies. And
that's
through
right.
the 5G Gwyn towers. You can look up the patent online. That's what they're made for. Those cell towers that you see, those are Gwyn towers. And Huawei actually had antennas put on them. If you bought Huawei's antennas, they can go up to 700 gigahertz, which is the low range of a microwave oven, which can cook your insides and destroy your brain.
And they still have that in the UK.
All of Europe. All of Europe, they banned them. They agreed with Trump to ban them, but then they didn't implement the ban until 2029.
Well, here's what happened.
China is conducting hive mind control in our NATO countries.
Former Prime Minister of UK, Boris Johnson, excuse me. he made the effort early in 2020 when he went to 10 down shrink to get rid of all the Huawei, and then boom, he got zapped. He had this new girlfriend. They got him. They took him out. But Huawei and all these Chinese products have backdoors, so they have control of it, not only your information, but the kind of weaponized, bioweaponized mechanics you're not even privy of knowing.
And the what they're doing is they're using psychological suggestion and stuff because they can put thoughts in your head, they can control your mind, and they can they're using it for color revolutions. In fact, USAID is also involved in the color revolution because they finance Black Lives Matter, and $20 million went to Black Lives Matter. There's also there was, and China was also financing that. George Soros got $250 million from USAID. We thought he was using his own money to put all these prosecutors in place that are letting the criminals out and the drug dealers and the murderers and all that out on purpose so that they can participate and be criminal. Because I don't know if you know this, but they use criminal informants and they mind controlled them to send them out to attack people and cause fires and burn cities. And
right.
It's a hive mind control technology that they're using for a color revolution. They're using the same technology in South Africa. They give away these antennas to these places, and or give them a real good deal, or they trade natural resources for them, and they put them up, and then they have control. That's what the world's at war over these the frequency control.
Buck, we have a limited amount of time left here at Late Night Update, but I want to ask you two things. I want to the last one being South Africa, I believe, but the first one I want to reiterate something. If you blinked and might have missed it, you might have not have just experienced what Buck said there about Gaza. Is if you missed the World at War episode just nights ago, well, Mideast powers reject Trump's proposal to take over Gaza. Trump plans to take over the Gaza Strip could be catastrophic. And why is that? Because on a lower level, the way I, see it is if the United States is kind of what it is to Hawaii in a sense, it now becomes a Gaza, then the Israelis don't have an excuse to just go carpet bomb all these neighborhoods that, by the way, are probably going to look more pristine than anything in all of Israel. They won't be able to just massively just genocide people. But you said that this is something that's not even on the menu of why Trump wants this. Can you reiterate that and potentially expand on that, Buck?
Well, one issue is he's drawing out who supports it and who doesn't. That's one of the big issues. And of course, almost 90% of the Middle East doesn't support it. Basically it puts us and Israel by ourselves. And that might be, that might be what happens during the end times. But there's also some back scenes or some back dealing that's going on that where he would get the investment from places like Georgia or Jordan and Egypt to rebuild the place. And then they would have an ownership stake in it. But I don't believe that plan. I think it was just a salvo to get China's reaction because China owned the ports before COVID.
Yeah, they want to move in.
And China attacked us with a biological weapon. China was behind, and USAID financed gain of function research with the Wuhan lab. So it's all connected. It was all financed we financed our own downfall, and China helped it, and China is pushing it, and China wants to take over the world with the frequencies and the 5G and the technology.
Well, here's my question too. Would you agree with me that there's a proxy war between China and Israel, and Iran is nothing but a kind of tag team partner of China that saber rattles Israel?
Russia and
that's
Iran.
how I've seen it for 5 years now. I've seen it that way. What your thoughts on that?
It's all working together, but the biggest issue was what happens if the rumor about Bibi being arrested, if that's true. I know that sounds crazy.
Wait a minute. What rumor? This is the first I've heard of this.
I don't know. It's dangerous to even talk about this, but if he was arrested.
So Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister of Israel, you're saying that there is a wild rumor now that he has been arrested. Am I hearing that correct?
Yeah, there's a wild rumor out there that he may have had involvement in 9/11 and may be headed to
Well,
Gitmo eventually.
that's not a wild rumor. That's just
but
one of the facts that never made the textbook due to a lack
but
of ink.
but not only that, there was an issue with COVID because 6 months before COVID, he had made a secret pact with China and Moderna and Pfizer to become the most secure country in the world, and that included jabbing us all with spy technology, which is the
Oh
graphene
yeah.
oxide that's
Um,
self-replicating and self-assembling nanoparticles that create mesh antennas in your body so they can read your mind and they can communicate with you with lower frequencies than what it takes if they just use your sequenced DNA. This is all MK Ultra stuff that a lot of people won't even believe, but it's true, and the patents are out there. I've got them on my Facebook timeline if you want to look.
Right, Buck. I have to ask you too. I want to get your take on, South Africa is in the spotlight here tonight on a late night update. A lot of this is new for a lot of people, but the implementation and the policies of quote unquote land reform, equality, that's not new for anybody here in the United States. Anybody who is in the Commonwealth, that's very familiar territory. So I think it's so important that we monitor what is taking place there. But why? What is the connection of USAID in South Africa? Why, out of all places, is taxpayer money going to that country? What's the connection?
Remember Oprah got busted with orphanages, right, in Africa, and I don't know if John of God, where was John of God located, but John of God was her buddy in Africa that ran the orphanages. The orphanages were that's where they were getting their children for the adrenochrome and the child sex trafficking
Oh,
for Hollywood.
it's so bad. It's so bad, Buck. I had a whistleblower from the Oprah Winfrey show. I had a whistleblower who was a producer there, told me it was so bad that they never allow those little girls to even bring cell phones into their classrooms because that's where the injustice took place. Continue, Buck.
What's bad is I've actually had some issues with people calling me racist for supporting Trump, some of my black friends on Facebook, and it pains me to see it because you can't prove that unless you get the mind reading technology to prove that I'm not racist. But I try to warn them because they support Hillary Clinton still to this day, and she was running kids from Haiti. I mean, she got busted. I mean, that was clear as day. President or Bill Clinton came in and cleaned it up and stopped the whole thing. But they even had the Amber Alert woman that was in charge of the Amber Alerts. She was appointed by Hillary Clinton, and she was one of the pedophiles that whenever an alert came by that was one of the kids that they stole, she could stop it. So I mean,
right,
it's going to come out.
It could go on for days.
Yeah, when this stuff comes out, and if BB's arrested, imagine how Trump's plan for giving Gaza back to the Gazans would work out. I mean, he would be loved by. I mean, the whole Middle East would go completely peace. There would be peace in the Middle East, but China.
I never thought about that. And,
China is not going to let it happen because China is just as much responsible as Israel is. That's why everybody with Corona was a dual citizen. Every person that was in Walensky, you go down the line, everybody in the WHO that was involved in it, the CDC, they were all dual citizens. Everybody in the Biden administration, dual citizens. It was all a plot and plan, but the military has been, arresting these people and trying them in the military tribunals. So they've got the evidence. We, just like Trump said, we've got it all. They've got it all.
I think that's how he's getting his appointees passed. Buck, we got to leave it there. It's going to be interesting to see what the next discovery as this new week is upon us is really going to be. It's a wild roller coaster ride. Thank you, Ranger Buck. It's very, very insightful. Thank you very much. Okay, well, you know what? We're at that time where we have to literally end it there. I have learned so much here tonight, and hopefully you have as well. If not about South Africa, about Gaza, or what China's doing, or what South America, with Argentina leading the way, is, well, actively doing and probably going to do more of in the future. But one thing that remains true is, as cliche in, despite our cynicism that we have just been infested with since the 1990s, one thing remains true that was true in my grandfather's generation is now coming true again, is that it's going to take Americans and America to lead the way, to hold the lantern for our friends and our relatives and all of our neighbors all over the world as we are getting out of this darkness. And when we are getting out of this darkness, and as we are seeing all these just changes all around us, we're seeing the fraudulence that has blinded us for so many years, and we're seeing the rotting core of the institutions as the falling of government as we know it from the 20th century version of it is a thing in the past. And now is a great time to rediscover the true essence of 1776. And it is a fantastic discovery. But we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank Buck, Ranger Buck, and his incredible enlightenment here tonight for joining us, and all of you for this extremely late night update. But it had to happen. It had to happen in this case. So for Buck and everyone else here at Real Deal Media's and Late Night Update, I'm Dean Ryan. Thanks for sharing this late night weekend with me. I'll see you soon, very soon. But always remember to stay tuned and stay awake. Good night, everybody.